is a good day. I mean, it's a really good day. It's a wonderful day. It's a marvelous day. It's an amazing day. This day is a really good day. Because 40 years ago, on this day, May 26th, 1979, this happened. Now, you may look in amazement at that photograph. This was 40 years ago today when that hot girl married this used mattress salesman looking guy. Because underneath that short-lived hair and behind that ill-conceived mustache was this person. And you may ask yourself while you're looking at this picture, how did that happen? Was there some court order involved? Was there some sort of penance that this beautiful young woman was required to make? And all I can tell you 40 years later is that science offers us no explanation of why this happened. But what I want to talk about today is how it lasted for 40 years. As anyone who has endeavored to build anything that lasts, in this life, if we want to build something lasting, whether it's a reputation or a legacy, whether it's a corporation, a profession, whether it's a career, or whether it is relationships, we know that the world does us no favors, that it constantly whispers into our ear that the grass is greener and that you could do better, and that maybe if you just changed some things that you would be happier. And many times it doesn't whisper to us, it screams at us. It offers us no consolation for those of us who are interested particularly in building lasting relationships. Today I want to talk about what it takes in a restless world, wrestling with our restless hearts, what it takes to build relationships that last. And it's not just marriages that last, it's partnerships and friendships and being neighbors and family members, brothers and sisters, sons and daughters, parents and children. What it takes to build lasting friendships and lasting relationships in a world that is endlessly, relentlessly restless. I want to share with you today the thing that I believe Diane and I discovered 40 years ago that has guided our relationship and has moved us through a restless world to where on this day, I can say 40 years later, we are still in pursuit of the same thing. And it is what I call the singulare finis. Today I want to talk about that one thing that has defined our relationship for 40 years and that I believe can guide anyone in the pursuit of building lasting relationships. But before I talk about the secret of the singulare finis, would you pray with me? Father in heaven, I would ask that the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart would be pleasing in your sight, that you would use your word spoken by your servant and anointed by your Spirit to remind us of the value and the beauty of things that last forever. Pray that we might have the courage and the conviction and the commitment to pursue such things in our lives, even in spite of our restless hearts. I pray that for myself and for my family, for all of us here. For I ask that in Jesus' name. Amen. I'm sure that those of you who are here who have built lasting relationships, lasting friendships, lasting partnerships, lasting marriages, lasting families know how difficult it is. Know the challenges of sort of keeping that commitment and following that path. And throughout our lives, we receive sort of a catalog, an endless stream of advice. And some of it is good, some of it is wise, and some of it is worth listening to. And in every season in our life and every stage in our life, there's different pieces of advice. There's different sort of wise counsel or lessons of experience that apply differently. Because as you build a lasting relationship, as you build anything that lasts, it has to last through the seasons and the journey of life. And so the accumulation of that wisdom, of that counsel, of that concern, and of that common sense experience is what contributes to the singulare finis. Some of this comes from our friends, some of this comes from our family, some of it comes from our own experiences, our successes and our failures. Some of it comes from Dr. Phil and Dr. Oz and Oprah. But over the last 40 years, I can say with some degree of confidence that Diane and I have found the greatest source of common sense wisdom and wise counsel to come from the Bible. It has often informed our journey in ways that have moved us forward significantly. It is the Bible that undergirds our singulare finis. About 6 weeks ago, we began a conversation about that wrestling with our restless hearts and searching for the contentment and the possibility of finding peace in a restless world. And so what we've been doing is we've been looking for counsel, looking for advice from the restless apostle, the Apostle Paul. And so today I want to conclude our conversation about wrestling with our restless hearts by looking at one of the first things that the Apostle Paul ever wrote. It is a letter that was preserved for us to the churches in the region of central Turkey, in the area of Galatia. And there in the letter that we have to the Galatians, at the beginning of this 6th chapter, I want to share with you 5 observations about how we can build our lives in a way that lasts and that contribute to the pursuit of the singulare finis. He begins in Galatians chapter 6, in verse 1, by saying, "Brothers and sisters, if any of you is caught in a sin, if anyone that you know or you yourself is caught in a sin, those of you who claim to be spiritual, those of you who are trying to live spiritual lives, those of you who want to manifest in your relationships a genuine transcendent spirituality, you should work to restore that person who failed, that person who fell, that person who harmed others. You should work to restore that person gently," he says. But then he cautions us. He says, "But be careful, because you yourself may be tempted. As you are engaging in that restoration, you may actually commit a sin that's worse than the original one." I think the first thing that contributes to the singulare finis that is essential for building lasting relationships is the practice of forgiveness. Now, I think we would all agree with that. Being forgiving and accepting forgiveness is essential if you want to build lasting relationships. The problem is we're crummy at it. We cheapen forgiveness by adding to it what I call phonelies and love butts. You know, phonelies and love butts. It's yeah, I will forgive you if only you wouldn't do that again. I will forgive you, but I love you, but I wish this hadn't happened. And we cheapen forgiveness because we imagine that it's just a spiritual Band-Aid that says, "Oh, don't worry about it, I forgive you." But we don't do the work that creates genuine forgiveness. I like to think of forgiveness like a medical practice. If you went to see a doctor and you had cancer and he just put a Band-Aid on you, you would say, that's not good medical practice. What a doctor does is they evaluate, they examine. The process of healing begins with a consideration, or it begins with an examination or a diagnosis. And then it begins. Then there's a prescription or an execution, like a surgery or something that attacks the problem, that seeks to remedy the infection or repair the wound. And then part of the healing process, the medical process, is rehabilitation or recovery. And true forgiveness in relationships looks very much like this. It requires some preparation. And by preparation, I mean communication, understanding. What did I do that hurt your feelings? Here's what I need to tell you so that you know how I'm feeling about what you said or what you did, or this is why I'm seeking to repair the relationship. It also involves some confrontation, and this is hard for most of us because it means communicating about the remedy, understanding how to repair the relationship. And finally, what does Paul say there in Galatians chapter 6? He says that you should restore the person gently, because the goal of forgiveness is not revenge, and it is not to clear the table, it is restoration of the relationship. And so to restore is the goal of forgiveness. And it's interesting that he says, but be careful, be careful. Because you could actually do more harm in being sloppy in your forgiveness, in being careless and reckless, in trying to seek out revenge or to seek out the measure of sort of payback instead of forgiveness. And you may actually commit a greater sin. You may be tempted to do something that's more harmful than was done to you. You see, forgiveness is about scalpels, not switchblades. You know the difference between a scalpel and a switchblade. They both cut. But a switchblade is intended to harm. You slash and you stab. And you say, don't do that to me again. I forgive you, but never that should happen. You're still a terrible person. Whereas a scalpel only addresses the point of need. It is carefully wielded by a surgeon who knows exactly how to remedy the injury. I think the first thing that contributes to the singulare finis is a commitment to honest and thorough forgiveness. In verse 2 of Galatians chapter 6, the Apostle Paul says, carry one another's burdens, because in this way you fulfill the law of Christ. By carrying each other's burdens, we fulfill the law of Christ. What is the law of Christ? In John chapters 13 and 15, Jesus makes it very plain that his command, his law, is to love each other. This is the command he gives us. John, writing in 1 John chapter 4, says exactly the same thing. He says that if you really love God, you will love your brothers and sisters. You will love as you have been loved. And so the idea of what it means to carry your brother's needs is generosity. But it's not a generosity that simply does things for other people. I think the key to the generosity, the kind of thing that carries one another's burdens, is not just to do things for others, but to do things with others. Any parent will tell you that if you simply do things for your children, you will not teach them how to grow into adulthood. The important thing is to do things with your children. Because in that act of generosity, carrying those burdens, because I can't carry your sorrow, I cannot carry your pain, I cannot take your anxiety from you and carry it for you, but I can carry it with you. This is how love works itself out in generosity. This is the second contributing factor to the singulare finis. The next thing that he goes on to say is in Galatians chapter 6, verse 3. He says something very unusual. He says, if anyone thinks they are something when they are not, which means that it's possible to be all that. It is possible for you to think you're something and be right. Like Dizzy Dean said, it ain't bragging if you can do it. But if you think you are something and you are not, you're self-deceived. I think the third thing that contributed to the singulare finis is humility. Along with forgiveness and generosity, humility is a practice that contributes to the strengthening of lasting relationships. But we often think of humility simply as a doormat, as putting yourself down and saying, well, yeah, okay, you hurt me, but I deserved it. I'm the one who brought this on myself. I'm a terrible person. That's not humility at all. Humility is an act of courage. I think there are three things that contribute to genuine humility. Kind of draw them like a triangle. First one is honesty. Genuine humility is honest. It's honest with yourself and it's honest with others. It can honestly hear what is going on even when it's uncomfortable. That's why it requires courage. Because you have to speak the truth in love. Ephesians chapter 4, verse 15 says, we are speaking the truth in love to each other. It's how you build humility into a relationship. The third thing that it requires is wisdom. Tactical common sense. Humility doesn't mean you just say what's ever on your mind. There's a time and a place, and there's a way to say things with great humility. Forgiveness and generosity and humility contribute to the singulare finis. In verses 4 and 5, the Apostle Paul adds another ingredient into the singulare finis. He says, each one of you should test your own actions. You should examine yourself. You should examine what you're doing so that you can take pride in what you have accomplished for yourself, in what you have done yourself alone without comparing to anyone else. And then he says, each one should carry your own load. Basically, the fourth factor that contributes to the singulare finis is responsibility. And what that means is to own your own stuff. Own your own stuff. Take responsibility for what is yours and don't take responsibility for what is not. And what that means, I think, is avoiding three things. First of all, it means avoiding being the victim, avoiding victimology. You know what the language of the victim is? The language of the victim is, you never do this for me. You always are like this. It is this language that says, I am the way I am because of who you are. You won't let me be myself. You won't affirm me. You're always in my way. It sounds a lot like the second thing that you need to avoid, which is blame. Blame often says, you never, you always. It's very similar to victimology. But basically it says, I'm not the way I am because of who you are. It's your fault. You are the reason that I can't make progress in my life. You are the reason that my life is the way that it is. Taking responsibility doesn't play the victim. It doesn't lay blame. And it also avoids comparison. You know what the language of comparison sounds like? You're not what they are. You're not the husband that my friend's husband is. You're not the wife that my friend's wife is. You're not the partner that my friend's partner is. In that comparison, in that sense of inadequacy, there is a shunning of responsibility. And what does Paul say in Galatians chapter 6, verse 5? He says, each one should carry their own weight. Each one should contribute to the success of the relationship. A relationship only lasts when both people are responsible to make it work. It's not one person's fault, and it's not one person's responsibility. It's these things that contribute to the singulare finis, forgiveness and generosity and humility and responsibility. And the last one is in verse 6. In verse 6 he says, nevertheless, the one who receives instruction in the word should share all good things with their instructor. The preacher's favorite verse. In case you didn't hear it clearly, let me explain it to you. He says, nevertheless, the one who receives instruction in the word, that would be you, should share all good things. And in the Greek, all good things means all good things. You should share all good things with your instructor. That would be me. Now, it's talking about a whole lot more than money there. It's talking about sharing the stories of how God is at work in your life. I can tell you the most valuable reward that I have in my life is hearing what God is doing in your life, the good things that God is doing through you and for you and among you. This is the reward. And I think the fifth thing that contributes to the singulare finis is teachability. Teachability means that ongoing sense that I'm not done yet, that I am in a lifetime pursuit of learning new things. And that means that we never stop asking, how you doing? What's going on? How you feeling? How was your day? How can I help you? Lasting relationships never stop asking, tell me more about how you are experiencing the world that we are in. They never stop learning. I like the phrase that says, as long as you are green, you will grow. It's when you think that you are ripe that you begin to rot. It is a lifetime pursuit of saying, help me understand. Help me understand your point of view. Help me understand how you see things, how you are experiencing. Let me help you understand how I am experiencing things. It is a lifelong pursuit, a willingness to say, I don't know everything. Teach me. And I think it means never stop improving. Because change doesn't necessarily mean improvement. Change can mean something gets worse, but anything that gets better has to change. And we never stop improving. We never stop saying, how can I do this better? How can I be a better friend? How can I be a better partner? How can I be a better parent? How can I be a better spouse? These are the things, these 5 things. They're a collection of things from Galatians chapter 6. Forgiveness and generosity, humility, responsibility, and teachability. It makes me feel like I'm a cook at Luby's. And I'm putting out a buffet, and I'm saying, I've got spinach for you, and I've got okra, I've got some mashed potatoes, I've got some wonderful green beans, and here is some grits for you. And you can come down the line and you can say, oh, well, I really like forgiveness, but I'm not big on the spinach of generosity. I hate the cauliflower of responsibility. And basically teachability, that's Brussels sprouts to me. I'm out on that one. And that's how we live our life. That's how life plays out for us. On this journey to build lasting relationships, we are accumulating the wisdom of others. We are receiving the wise counsel from any place that we can find it. Diane and I particularly found that wise counsel often in the Bible, but we also found it in our friends and in our mentors, in our church family, in our brothers and sisters and mothers and fathers. And all of that contributes to the singulare finis. So what is it? What is the singulare finis? Well, it's Latin. And it means singular finish. It means one goal, one objective, one desire. You see, I believe that our relationships look a lot like railroad tracks. Have you ever stood on a straight section of railroad tracks, stood in the middle of the tracks and looked toward the horizon? What does it appear that the railroad tracks do as you go further down toward the horizon. It appears that they get closer together, doesn't it? But if you walk a mile down those railroad tracks, how much closer are the tracks? Not an inch. You walk 100 miles down the railroad tracks, how much closer are they? Not an inch. You walk 1,000 miles, you spend your lifetime walking down the railroad tracks, and all you have are two separate strands that are tied together by ties and bolts and spikes. And that's how most of our life is. That's how most of our relationships are. Most of our relationships are those relationships that we share in common with others. As long as our lives run in parallel, as long as we're neighbors, as long as we're co-workers, as long as we are living together in the same house, we are building a life that moves us down the tracks, but we never get any closer, no matter how far we go. It's the singulare finis that says the closer you get to this, the closer you get together. Because in those rare instances, and these are rare, and if you can have it once in your life, you are fortunate to find another person who is willing to say, you and I will aim at the same thing. And it's not to accomplish a certain goal, and it's not to acquire a certain objective. It's to become a certain kind of person. And I can tell you that 40 years ago, Diane and I agreed that the people we wanted to be was the same kind of people. That we wanted to grow closer to our Savior as individuals. And the closer we have gotten to that reality, the closer we have come to each other. And for 40 years, the pursuit of becoming that individual has fashioned our singulare finis and guided us for 40 years. May 26, 1979, the inexplicable happened. The hot girl married the dingus used mattress salesman. And we didn't know what we were doing, except we knew exactly where we wanted to go, who we wanted to be. For each other, we wanted to be godly individuals. And that pursuit has guided us for 40 years. Now, you may not realize it, but Riverbend Church was started the same year. In 1979, a group of people came together and they said, we want to pursue the same thing. This is a really good day that I am here with you 40 years later in the place that is pursuing the same thing that my wife and I have been pursuing for 40 years. Do you understand how amazing that is? What we are celebrating, we cannot think of anywhere else on earth or anyone else we would rather celebrate these 40 years with than here. Because this is truly a good day.